Okay, week 8. We only have one more week left, and this is a big week for us. So you're going to do layout using Flexbox or Grid. I'll get to that in a minute. But first, I just want to go over some concepts that I'm including this week, and then I'll talk about how I implemented Grid and Flexbox into my design. So in this week, you're taking the P2, right? You're creating a new folder at that same level. Now, what's happening at this point, and this already happened in step 2, right? Project 2 is that because in step 1, many of you went out and played and found a lot of images. When you copy it into, when you did it for last week, you generally copy those over, which is creating a lot of files. And so at this point, what you want to be thinking about is decreasing the files that you downloaded but you're not going to be using. Okay, so that's one thing. Like when I looked at my folder structure, and I'm just going to bring up, like here's the ones that I had for this week. And the ones that I had like back here, I had a lot more of them, right? And I ended up, actually not that, maybe it's P3, I had a lot more that I went and played with. So what you want to do, and I'm just showing you, yeah, so there's, right, so you want to first decrease, only have in here the ones you're going to be using. That's one thing. Get rid of stuff you're not using. And so the other thing is you want to optimize. Now, I know this might be a little hard to see. Yeah, so if I was to look at a PNG, now this is something we covered in CIT82, and in this class, we haven't talked about it, and Dave didn't really talk about it. He talked about images, but it is worth talking about right now, some of these concepts. Like if you were to go down through here and I was to look at the size of an image, before I optimize it. Now these are probably not the best examples because I optimize and then I save them, but what you generally can do is, even with images that have a JPEG, which is a type of way they're encoded, you can still save them as PNGs, and I'll show you on the Mac. I can just open them up, right? I'll bring it back over here, and even on Windows you have something like this, so you can adjust the size. For one thing, that image on my site does not need to be that big. So generally, right, you figure out what the size you want to have it on, but look what happens to the size of the file itself. Kilobytes, okay, is how big. So remember, everybody likes the web to load fast, and as a developer you need to make sure you've optimized images. So I'm just showing you on the Mac. Windows has this similar feature, it's out there, but I'm also going to show you a way on the web to do this. So a couple things on this week. First, as you copy it over into week 3, only copy the image you're using and optimize those images. Now, I just showed you how I can do it by changing the resolution. You can also go to something like Optzilla. There's definitely Optimizilla. There's also, I just did a general search for how to optimize images online. There's a lot of online sites you can do this with. But what you really want to do is you want to make, there's always a trade-off between how crisp a picture looks, and it's because we're optimizing it through saving it in some of these what we call loss or lossless techniques. But really what you want to do is you want to figure out for your page layout the best size, and then make it the smallest you can so that your site loads fast. And this is such an important topic, again, because I assume students coming from 82 into this class, and some of you haven't, you don't have that experience yet. Okay, so I want to say that I've put it down here is to make sure you've optimized your images, right? And if you're not using images, then don't copy them over. So start now by getting rid of some of those, because in P1 many of you just started downloading and creating files. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. Copy them somewhere outside of your structure for this class. That way if you want them later you can get them. Okay, so think about that as you're doing this week's setup, and then of course go ahead and commit that. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to talk about with this week. Now, in my case, the way I approach, and I'll go ahead and show you, here's my output for this step, is I implemented in this week I implemented Flexbox up in here. This was really fun to do because I had this differently. I found this really nice image. I think I ended up using Pixabay. Pixabay, I went and found some nice images. I posted a link out on Discord for other places you can get them. Find the royalty-free stuff. It was really great. So I found that image that I really liked, which actually I think ultimately is going to make me redo my color palette because I don't like the way some of the colors look, but I like this image. So that's just something you have to figure out. So that's one thing is and notice how I used, in this case, that filter idea that Dave showed us. So I ended up using vertical height to just give it the height so that on the main page, now on the sub pages, I don't use that, but I'm using it only on the index, which is fairly common to see that. And I use that cover idea with the vertical height space to do that with. Like, I think I used 75% here so that it took up. And the reason I did that is that oftentimes we like seeing these nicer high resolution images. Okay, so I use Flexbox here. I used, I think, space between, and so what I ended up having is this menu was in one type of semantic container, and then and in this case I used my name on this one, but in the sub pages then these were the title of the pages. But in this case what I did is I placed over here another div, and then I did space between, and so that's what created that nice menu on one side and name on the other. Okay, so this is where I was talking about with images, right? The other thing I noticed with images too, I had to, when I was optimizing things, and I was noticing that which by the way, when you're using images, you do need to include the fig, it's the fig tag, the image tag, and then the fig caption. And I noticed I ended up having to do the display. What was that? The trick he showed us about making sure things cleared, because in this case I also used the float here, but maybe that was just because I was using a float. And if you run into that, shout out, and I'll let you know how I ended up. I can't remember. There was some display, maybe offset or something. But anyway, that's what made my images. But in this case, I did make my images responsive. So even with just doing, and in this case here, this whole layout was done with Flexbox using the grid area. I really liked learning grid. I totally get why people love it now. So I use grid to lay out the whole site, but then individual sections like this one, I ended up using Flexbox here as well. And by the way, those tools in Developer Tools that Dave showed us for grid, you can also, he may have showed it in Plex, or maybe I don't remember him talking about it, but in that case you can also go look. Like you can see here, I know it's probably hard to see on the page, but you can see I had grid here, and then like if I go up into here and I hit inspect, you can see that was flex, and then you get all this nice, notice when I roll over, look in this area, you can see it shows you how that was done as far as visually working that. So what you want to do in this case, you want to implement some kind of page layout. You don't have to do it the way I did. I ended up using a sidebar as far as the grid goes. I did semantically make this an aside because that kind of makes sense along the way. Okay, so I did that. I still have some work I definitely need to do in this case, but I feel really good about it, right? I feel like, and what I did this week is I ended up rebuilding the site, because from doing P2, I had played around so much, I decided I just wanted to go completely wipe it and start it again, because sometimes you do so much work you're not sure. It's that old idea of the, the blinds, like what's working or what's not. And rebuilding really helped me see my layout and my code and how I could optimize using the cascade. I mean, that's really what we're all learning here, is understanding that cascade and how to lean into it. Okay, so refactor, this is what I was just talking about. Refactor your output from P2 to implement a layout, right? And Flexbox and or grid. Like I told you, I use grid for my page layout, and then within my layout, I use Flexbox to then for individual items, because Flexbox was just so easy. in that case. And grid was too, but grid really leaned in better for the layout. Okay, so you also want to add a new subpage to one of your menu pages. So here's what I mean by that. So like on my, that's 3. Yeah, that was 3 actually. So I have a couple of versions, so it's actually, I'm close to the final version here. So for me on my Y, I ended up creating a new page. So when I say create a new page, I don't mean create a new menu. I mean from one of your pages that you already have, create a new page that you link somewhere in the content. Okay, so for me it was cybersecurity. So I added a page on cybersecurity, and each page does need at least one image. You don't want to go overboard with the images, but you definitely want to make use of images that help convey the meaning here. Okay, so when I say go back here. So when I say add an image, that's what I mean. And you'll hear me say the same thing when we get to Thursday night's item as well. Okay? Okay, so make sure you have nothing. Make sure everything is still untitled. I will look for that. Right? And I talk about here, like really limit, try to not use divs at all possible. I know sometimes it's like you're nesting sections and articles and stuff like that. And then sometimes like, no, I just want a div so I don't have to worry about the semantic stuff. I get that. Right, but try to limit their use when at all possible. And of course, in the main structure, we're not, we've already talked about this. So I'm just kind of reiterating, limit your use of them. Okay, so add that page, and then also when you add this page, you'll need to also add it to your sitemap as well. And then I've already talked about the optimization. Okay, so here's what you saw me do in P2. So we're going to do it here as well. Okay. But, and I want you to show me your progress over time. Like I want to see, your commits and your documentation, right? So in your README files, talk about your general approach to your page layout. And of course, your commits show me your progress. And this is why I say here, show me your progress and your process. Because this is my way of validating, authenticating the work that you're doing and seeing your thought process. Okay, so remember, this is how I grade your work. So I'm looking for, did you implement, what layout did you implement with grid and or flexbox, right? Again, I don't tell you have to use grid. You could use, if you felt like I want to use completely flexbox, you could do that. I recommend actually doing both. Most of the stuff I see online says you probably want to do a combination of both. It makes sense, right? And then, give me those commit messages that tell me about the work that you're doing, right? Starting grid layout or finishing flexbox layout. Because what I will look for over your commits for this week is, how did you approach it? And I piece together looking at your code to do that. Okay, I hope this gives you an idea about what you need to do for this week. I'll now go record the next one, which is media queries. So check that out.